if you want to thrive and scale your business, you need feedback loops. If you want to thrive as an individual and you want to perform as an individual, you need feedback loops.
You're still working hard, putting in the hours every single day, they're 12, 14-hour hustles, but you're not really moving forward. What is that secret to breaking that ceiling? Is it more effort? Is it more hard work? Is it hiring more people? Is it more knowledge?
If you're stagnating, if you're at a stage of stagnancy, it's not like you're just staying level, you're regressing. You're going back, you're getting worse over time. And that is the unfortunate situation that happens when you do not engage in feedback loops. The one who's able to reflect more and actually use feedback loops more achieves success at a far higher rate than people who don't.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Central and Co. Well, not Co as in Co, but Co as in
COO. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How you doing, akhi? Good.
Alhamdulillah, still rocking the hat, yeah?
Yeah, man. We're still recovering, as you guys can see. So, inshallah, I reckon 1 week more before I can get a solid lineup, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay, so today's episode is going to be a very, very core part of not only your personal development processes, but also a process that you use within your businesses to help them grow and scale. So this is actually one of the first episodes where we're going to merge between the two, personal performance and business performance, inshallah ta'ala. So we are going to be talking more about business principles as well. So this is as well for those people that are hustling hard, but they're feeling a bit stuck, whether you're stuck at a specific revenue level, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60K a month and beyond, or even if you're starting out. Now, managing clients, struggling with operations, all these things are very, very difficult to manage. There's no clarity on how you can get to that next stage, right? So secret to breaking that ceiling. Is it more effort? Is it more hard work? Is it hiring more people? Is it more knowledge? What exactly is that methodology? So in this episode, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to be looking at feedback loops and self-reflection, inshallah ta'ala. You ready, Sheikh?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to paint a picture to the listener, inshallah ta'ala. So imagine this. You wake up early, ready to take on the day. You've got back-to-back meetings, emails following your inbox, bunch of client calls to handle. You move from one task to the next and you keep knocking them off your list. You're busy. You can even say you're productive. I want to push away from that term, but let's say you're productive, but deep down there's this nagging feeling that you kind of have, and despite the hustle, you're still working hard, putting in the hours every single day, they're 12, 14-hour hustles, but you're not really moving forward, right? So I want people to put that picture into their mind, and most likely it sounds familiar. How does a person get out of that loop?
Perfect. So I think it's first important to break down and understand what are feedback loops, right? Now, feedback loops are essentially when you get the outputs of a system, the results of something happening, and you feed it back into the inputs. So the outputs ultimately influence the next inputs, right? So if you can imagine, our bodies are actually feedback loops, right? With our temperature regulation, right? At one stage, if our body starts to go too hot, homeostasis happens for us to naturally cool down. So our body maintains a certain temperature, right? Same thing if we're in a cold environment, our body engages in certain practices, now new practices to regulate our temperature. Now this is something that is super, super important, right? Because as human beings, we wouldn't be able to survive without feedback loops, right? Every time we need feedback loops to be able to adjust temperature changes, situation changes. That's what allows us to continue surviving, essentially, right? Now, when it comes to your business, if you want to thrive and scale your business, you need feedback loops. If you want to thrive as an individual and you want to perform as an individual, you need feedback loops. The outputs, the results should ultimately always affect the what? The inputs. That's just how it should be. If it's any other way, it's problematic, right? Now, what do I mean by that? To break it down in a bit more sense, right? There's positive feedback loops and there's negative feedback loops. Now, an example of a negative feedback loop, technically speaking, would be the one I just mentioned, right? Where our body always aims to regulate. Now, naturally, this is how we are. We don't like too much stress. We don't like too much difficulty in our lives or too much discomfort. So we always regulate. Whenever we work hard, we always want to be lazy for a while. This is the automatic regulation, but this is a negative feedback loop because it stops you from actually growing and becoming better. A positive feedback loop is a bit different. A positive feedback loop, you're using the previous outputs from the previous process, right? You're using those outputs to feed it back into the inputs to what? To get better and better and better.
That's even if you had a win.
100%. Even if you had a win, whether it's a win or a loss, you're using those outputs to put it back into your business to get bigger and better, or in your performance to, again, continuously grow.
Perfect. So one of the statements that I have here is from Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, and it says that the heart is like a mirror. It must be polished through reflection and the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously this kind of perfectly comes together with this feedback loop model that you're talking about, because it helps us to always look back over ourselves and everything around us. Because even within the performance modules, we're going to be talking about every single angle of performance that you could look at, you put it through this feedback loop system, right? And again, obviously that reflection requires certain amount of questions, to know how to even reflect properly. So if we're going to look at, for example, mental performance, what are some questions that you can ask yourself to reflect over to ensure that you're growing?
Perfect. I think people need to understand, even in the first place, why feedback loops are important for us. So I'm just going to even take a couple of steps back here, right? What you need to understand is you need to start to view yourself, your life, and everything as a system, all right? And this is what we have been preaching in the podcast, but today I actually want to attack it with a bit more vigor. This means you need to start to understand that your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions are all as a result of something, right? A lot of us are stuck on the effects, the results, the outputs, but what we don't understand is to get to that output, there had to be certain inputs and processes that led us to that output. When you understand yourself as a system, you're able to now think more systematically, meaning you don't see things as just happening, or you don't see things as just random. You say there was a certain inputs that led to this output. There was a process, and if I can understand, tame, reflect, adjust that process, ultimately ends up more beneficial for me. For example, right, if there's not enough revenue in the company, now that's an output, that's the result. What do I need to do? I need to make certain decisions to maybe add certain extra technicals, right, to add more revenue. Okay, add more things of better products, better services, or perhaps I need to again go on the other side where I need to start reducing expenses, etc. Feedback loops are what helps a company grow. But why do people not use feedback loops enough? Because we don't reflect. Like we said, that's where the whole point and the whole importance of reflection comes from in the first place. If you do not reflect, if you're not in constant reflection of how you are, how you're performing, how your business is doing, then you can't naturally take these newfound feedback, you can't plug that into the new system, meaning you're making the same mistakes twice. And this actually brings about a hadith that I love, and I think all Muslims should think about in their lives. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, لا يلدغ المؤمن من جحر واحد مرتين. A believer should not fall into the same hole twice, or shouldn't get stung by the same bee twice. If you do not reflect, naturally you can't do that. So an essential part of feedback loops is reflecting upon what has happened over the last period. This is something we should do in our day. The one who is able to reflect more and actually use feedback loops more achieves success at a far higher rate than people who don't. Does that make sense?
Could you say that it's also a form of escapism, because sometimes the true reason why you're not able to scale or get to that next level, but you choose to ignore it? What are some of the consequences of ignoring reflection?
Perfect. So naturally you don't grow. Stagnation. And stagnation, by the way, naturally means what? Regression, right? If you're stagnating, right? If you're at a stage of stagnancy, it's not like you're just staying level. You're regressing. You're going back, you're getting worse over time. And that is the unfortunate situation that happens when you do not engage in feedback loops. But you have to understand why people don't reflect. I actually want to talk about this, right? We know the power of reflection. We all understand. Every single human being, whether or not he engages in it, maybe they don't understand how powerful it is, but they understand the power of reflection to some degree. But why don't we? Because you see, here's the thing. When we indulge in self-reflection, that means we actually have to hold ourselves to account, right? That means we actually are going to be responsible for certain things. Does that make sense? So that's where a lot of the times the problem lies. We don't want to reflect, because if we reflect, we actually have to take accountability that, look, you know what? It's actually my fault the business isn't growing. It's actually my performance that's the reason the company is stagnating, right? Or is getting worse over time. It's actually my fault that I fell out with that brother. There was something that I could have done better. You see, if I look at a situation on the surface level, it's like, I don't like the way he spoke to me. That's the problem. But the actual better way to look at it and systematic approach is what inputs, what processes led to that output of him speaking to me like that, for example, right? Okay, I can say, okay, perhaps the way I spoke to him in the first place as well is what caused him to what? Speak to me like that.
That even reminds me of one of the retreats that we went to one time, and we had a conversation. I had a conversation with someone, and anyone that knows me personally, I'm not the type of person to get into a fight or just go crazy. I remember just having a normal discussion with someone, and then all of a sudden he just flipped. I hate you, I don't like you, but wallah, I'm like, I don't even know you. But I went back and I realized it was my fault, right? Because, okay, I don't know him, but I know his character, right? I know that this type of person, if I interact with this type of person, there's certain topics, there's certain ways I don't speak to them, right? So I learned as a result of that, and it saved me from other situations of speaking to people in a similar kind of, certain people have, that certain things trigger certain people. So even general outside of business, just even general relationships and dealing with people, if you use this system, you have ways of learning. And as anyone that knows us, we have like notebooks where we just write notes of things that we observe from our own mistakes and our own wins as well. It's like, yeah, we made 50K or 100K this month. Could we have made 200 from using this system instead?
People commonly ask me, like, credit your success at a young age to something. After Allah and my mother's du'as, I really blame the concept of performance. And the only way I was able to achieve this peak performance was by feedback loops. Feedback loops are crazy. They are insane. Like, the power of feedback loops is something that can't be misunderstood. And it's actually Islamic concept as well, muhasabah, right? Which is constant self-accountability, constant self-reflection. When you're constantly overlooking yourself and overlooking your actions, what happens? You start to actually learn and understand yourself a lot more, allowing you to better, again, your relationship with Allah. You stop falling in, because it's like this for majority of people. Even when you look at it from an Islamic paradigm, right? We sin, okay? And then we make tawbah, we repent to Allah, and then we aim to never sin again. That's stupid. That's not enough, to be honest with you. A wise person, you know what he does? He actually accounts, he reflects a little bit deeper. What led me to actually committing that sin in the first place, right? What are the triggers of that sin? What maybe environment? Because again, a system cannot disassociate itself from the environment in which it operates in. Okay, I'm going to repeat that again because I know it flew over your head top. A system cannot disassociate itself from the environment in which it operates in. Meaning what? Naturally, if you are lacking, right, in your environment is lacking, it affects the system. I always like to give the example of an oven. I could have the best cake in the world, Habibi, right? The best, ingredients to make a cake. I'm talking top quality flour, bro. Top quality eggs. I'm not going to name anything else because I don't know how to make a cake, right? That's not my role.
Play your position.
Right? Exactly. Play your position, man. But like I mentioned, you could have the best ingredients in the world, right? You could have the best tins, trays, everything. And you could have the best instructions, the best recipe, grandma's recipe as they like to call it, on how to bake the best cake. But if the oven doesn't get hot enough, the cake doesn't get baked. Right? You can't have the best cake if the oven doesn't get hot, right? If it doesn't reach the temperature, or if the oven gets too hot, what happens? Your cake is burnt. So what I'm trying to emphasize and what I'm trying to get people to understand is your environment also affects the system, right? Which is something we also look at in the feedbacks. And this is why, by the way, like, I just want to even just pause here for a second. This is going to be an ad, but it's not even an ad. I just want to say, like, this is exactly why the peak performance mastery is so good. We look at every aspect of their system, right? We look at the inputs, we walk them through the processes, we understand the processes, we walk them through the outputs. Okay, we look at their environment in which they're operating in, and we've actually put them in an environment of high performance as well, so it changes them a lot quicker through contextual shifting. And also, we take that with feedback, and we're constantly, changing things. Does that make sense? It's like with real-time data. When you're able to adjust off of real-time data, that changes. I want you to imagine a football game in where the footballers didn't know the score. They weren't able to keep score. Actually seeing that post, that sign of 3-0, for example, allows him to be like, you know what? We need to up our game. They start to play at a higher standard. That's, again, an example of a feedback loop. The output, which is that 3-0, allows him to put more effort, more energy, allows the team to play wiser. And sometimes, again, it could be a different style where they lose morale because of that 3-0. We are constantly taking that real-time data on you, from tracking you, from the sheets. Again, holistic process, really, alhamd. And then we're making certain decisions and changes based off of that. Does that make sense? But this is what I'm saying, like, self-accountability comes from Islam, right? Umar bin Khattab, radiallahu anhu, he says the famous statement, right? Hold yourself to account before you're held to account, right? And, basically check your deeds before your deeds are checked, right? Now, when we look at this is a saying, right, from Umar bin Khattab. that I think has been absolutely like rinsed by the Muslims, and they've taken the value out of this. This is the emphasis of feedback loops, because if you're holding yourself to account, if you're reviewing yourself, I actually read a quote by Ibn al-Jawzi in one of his books. He said, the one who doesn't reflect is not from us. And it makes sense when you break it down, because people who do not reflect on their actions, they constantly make the same mistakes again and again. They never improve. It's an ongoing cycle, and I see this all the time with entrepreneurs that performing at highest level, then they lack, and then they perform at the highest level again, the company start to make a bit of money. That's because, again, they're not assessing the feedback. And that's the first thing I do with my clients, to regulate, assess the feedback. To grow, then we need to assess the feedback. So the first stage we always work through is regulation. Our goal is to regulate your performance, right, as much as possible. Then we can start to peak it. Because if we start to peak without regulating, what happens? Again, like the programs you take, like the things you study online, like the books you read, you perform for a while, and then you return back to your old habits.
One of the ways that we can look at even feedback loops, okay, or just general reflection of your company, is it's one of the ways of defeating procrastination, right? Because there's one of the books is what? Lean Startup. I remember in the early stages when I first started business, Fawaz was explaining the concept of Lean Startup.
I love this book, by the way. I really recommend it for anyone who has a business idea that, but they can't get started because they think they're missing certain things.
And even within a company that generates 6 figures, sometimes there's a specific product, if you were to launch it, right, that will be the thing to get you to maybe the next 6-figure level or the next 7-figure level. But no one wants to do that. Why? Because they're so scared of this and this. Even, sometimes I'm like, yeah, but I don't know if that's the time for now. But it's like, no, try it out. We can do a soft launch with the product, with the service, whatever it is, even with the service, especially because one of the business principles we teach is if you have a product-based business, add a service to scale. Or if you have a service-based business, add a product to scale, right? So sometimes like, yeah, but I haven't really tested it out. So do a soft launch, reflect. What is the feedback saying? Go back, call them up. One of the ways we actually scaled one of the companies, you remember that?
Oh my goodness, guys, I'm going to give you this cheat code. Sorry, I stole it right out of your mouth, but Barakallah feet for bringing that to my attention. One of the ways we scaled our companies was feedback loops. You know what we used to do? We used to just go back to all our clients, call them and be like, yo, may Allah bless you, bro. We seen you, Pat. What would you do to improve this product? We weren't even coming up with the ideas anymore for the company. We were speaking to them, and then whenever they came up with a good idea, we'd send them something, or we'd give them like a discount or something like that. They were giving us the feedback that was changing and growing our business, right? This is the importance of feedback loops. People who don't take feedback into account, they fail, they flop. It's a constant cycle for them. Does that make sense? I'm telling you, and even for those who think they leverage feedback loops, come sit with me for an hour. I'll show you don't know nothing about real feedback loops and how to really leverage it. Does that make sense?
Feedback is just core foundation in everything in life. You know what's funny? The same person that I got into a bit of a disagreement with in that trip, I remember that one of the mentors was discussing with them and giving them feedback on how you can scale your company and his mentor was on stage. Do you remember? Right? And his mentor was stage and his mentor was taking on all the feedback from other guys that are in different business models. He was like, I already knew that. I know.
Yeah.
Allah, it could be one statement that you gain from feedback that absolutely changes the trajectory of your life. Our own companies, we've mentioned it in the podcast. One of the Fawaz Central, Ustad Imran, based on certain feedbacks that he's given us, alhamdulillah,
changed the game for us, alhamdulillah.
Changed the game.
And that's the important thing. I think I even want to take it back to that statement that I was mentioning of Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. He says the more he reflects, the more he learns, and the more he naturally changes, the closer he gets to Allah. Feedback loops brings you closer to Allah as well. This is what I'm telling people, right? Unfortunately, and a lot of us do feedback loops, to be honest, when it comes to the company, right? I'm not worried about that so much. Now, I think it can be improved and bettered, of course. But the problem is we don't do feedback loops on ourselves enough. We don't reflect on our personal selves and like make feedback loops for ourselves, things like our performance, things like how our week went, how our day went. Like literally one of the things that my clients have said, like, you know what, Fawaz, one of the practices you made us do that changed the game for us. It was literally making them after the end of each week, they have to fill out the end of the week report. That thing, and we look at the feedback again, it's you're correcting your actions again and again. The more you correct yourself, the more better you become. The more better you become, the more you grow, the more you scale, the more you can take on, the more your business grows. I keep saying, James Clear says it in the book Atomic Habits, and I think it flew over so many people's heads. This quote, like, bro, just right over the majority of people's heads. He says, people don't rise to the level of their goals, they fall to the level of their systems. And I say entrepreneurs don't rise to the level of their technicals, they fall to the level of their performance. And give me a statement that's more true than that. No matter how good your technicals are, if you're not able to perform at the highest level, bro, what good is, you're going to fall to your level of performance. So this is why I say entrepreneurs do not rise to their level of technicals, they fall to the level of performance. As long as they can't perform to the highest degree, they can't grow to the next level, no matter what technicals you put on them. And this is why I've always said people who are better at performing, because they're doing things like feedback loops and they have the data and they're tracking themselves, they are improving and growing their businesses at a way quicker rate than a guy who understands technicals marketing, right? I've always said it, like, okay, you're better than me at technicals, but I'm able to perform, right? Can technicals be learned and understood? Yeah, 100%. So what's stopping me from surpassing you? Nothing. You have to ultimately get ready to actually get the best of your performance. And that's what I feel like majority of people aren't doing. Get better. Learn to start performing. If you learn to perform, you're going to get to a next level in terms of your technicals. Your business starts to grow. You start to achieve more life satisfaction as well. This is for every single person, by the way. Again, we are targeting 6 to 7 figure entrepreneurs on the podcast, but this works for people who aren't there yet. Use feedback loops. Feedback loops helps you understand what works, what doesn't work. Reflect more often, right? Every night before you go sleep, have certain practices that you indulge in. Does that make sense?
Perfect. You know, one of the things I was going to discuss, right? So you have a famous statement that you talk about businesses don't have business problems, but rather there's
personal problems that reflect on their business.
Right? One of the things I remember you taught as well in very, very early stages when you used to do trading, innit? When basically you used to teach us the kind of the accountability aspect of trading. It's actually one of the reasons, although we believe it's haram, clearly no one should trade.
100%.
Forex, right? But one of the principles that really helped us grow as traders was this concept of the feedback loop. And
that's how I beat all my mentors, by the way.
Honestly.
Or like every mentor I ever had, like in that aspect, wallah, I surpassed them in percentages. Wallah, I smoked them in percentages. Like, yeah. And I'm going to tell you guys why in a second.
Inshallah, right. One of the things you were talking about was before, like you see a person, he's getting angry at his family, he's, this thing pissed him off, out completely outside of trading. This thing pissed him off. He goes into charts, he goes into his business plummets, his trading plummets, his deen plummets, and he believes that there's no correlation between the two.
It's silly. I can't understand how entrepreneurs can sit here and even begin to explain to me or begin to help me understand how like their personal performance doesn't affect their business and how they think they don't have another realm to climb, that they think, yeah, there's so many, they understand. That's what makes me laugh. That's what baffles me. When you speak to them, they understand, bro, there's so much more I have to learn about business. But he's never ever said there's so much more I have to learn about myself. How ridiculous, right? And Ibn al-Qayyim is here saying what? The more you reflect, the more you learn from yourself, the more you can correct, ultimately the closer to Allah you become. Does that make sense? So for me, bro, it's actually kind of nuts, bro, that people haven't been able to sit back and actually realize the power of this, right? And I even just want to touch on something really quickly, inshallah. Here's the thing. I want you to think of your body like a car, right? Think of your body like a car. The engine, the fuel system, the cooling system, everything works together to what? To make the car function, right? In harmony for optimal performance. If one of those things is off, naturally something is affected. Something in the system is affected, right? Now, of course, the fuel system in itself is a system, right? The engine in itself is a system, right? All of these things in themselves are systems, right? But if they are not working together in harmony, there's not optimal conditions. It's you're the same thing. If your life isn't at optimals, your mind, your body, everything, they all need to be in sync for you to be at peak performance. If you're lacking in certain areas but doing good, and this is why we said, no, listen, you can't just tackle performance or you can't just teach mindset or just mind control. It's good for the people who are starting, but for the entrepreneurs, a much more holistic approach is needed. We need to look at their businesses, how it's affecting their personal lives, how the personal lives are affecting their business, and within their personal lives, their mind, right? Their body, right, etc. We have to look at it in detail. We have to look at emotional control, their ability to handle stress. Because again, it's going to affect. If you have bad stress management, it's going to affect your company. If you're not able to what? Actually leverage your ability to perform under stressful situations or difficult situations, what happens, bro, naturally? Again, it's going to affect your business. Executive performance, strategic performance. If they don't understand how to track, understand what they're doing, having a plan, having direction as to how to build a plan the best way possible. Again, what happens? They can't build it in the way that what they would like. And this is why we target these things from a holistic approach rather than looking at things separately.
SubhanAllah. And you know, it's funny, like one of the things I was thinking about was like certain guys that we're speaking to and we're helping consult like 40, 50. You know, these like they've outlived us in terms of years. But when you look at what is the difference is experience. But the difference is experience can go to waste if it's not learned, if it's not realized. Prophets are not prophets unless they're realized, as you always used to tell us, right? So one of the things is, how does a person, he goes through life with experience, but how does he take that as a lesson for himself to implement into his own life?
How does he take that as a lesson?
How does he take experience and actually utilize it?
Yeah, experience is rubbish. We mentioned this on the last podcast, right? I think that's actually how we ended, no?
No.
Experience is a load of rubbish, and I'm going to tell you guys why next week. So here we are, alhamdulillah. Here is why. Feedback loops is the reason I said experience is rubbish. How many people do you know in your life that have been through multiple experiences, but they're still in the same situation, right?
It's
not, in fact, the situation gets worse. This is because they don't engage in reflection or feedback loops. They're not taking the feedback and actually using it, plugging it back into the system, right? Put something up here, like the graph of feedback loops, inshallah, so people really understand how it works, inshallah, right? But he doesn't change unless he reflects. How many times, like, bro, you know, it bothers me when I make a mistake twice, because that naturally means I didn't reflect. I experienced this before. I've been here before. I should know exactly the steps. But again, I didn't reflect. So now I'm lost and I'm stuck again. Does that make sense? So naturally, that's what we want to fix. We aim to rectify with the feedback loops, reflection.
That phrase you said, I've been here before. I'm sure so many times, so many entrepreneurs have seen themselves in situations like, how on earth how did I get here again? You know what I'm saying? It's like the company was doing 200K a month, 300K a month, and I'm back to 50, 30, 40. Why? Because you didn't reflect.
And that's why as well, by the way, in our program, like, this is what blows out all of the other ones. You know, we do not ignore the concept of Baraka. Baraka is real. Does that make sense? That's something, unfortunately, when you, Baraka, blessings, right? That's something when you study from the kuffar and, you know, you study from the non-Muslims' performance, they'll never teach you about the concept of barakah. Everything is in your own hands and blah, blah, blah. No, that's not how life works, bro. We understand barakah. And any of us who, when you practice the deen, you see the barakah in your life as well. You see the difference, barakah. And this brings me back to a statement of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. He says, when one corrects, right, his heart, his relationship with Allah, Allah corrects what is in his hand. Does that make sense? Meaning what? Just to even give that again. When you correct with Allah, your heart, you're correcting your heart, and the relationship your heart has with Allah, Allah will correct what is in your hands, meaning whatever you have will be blessed. It's better now. Does that make sense? So this is something that, again, can't be ignored when we talk about feedback loops and reflection. We have to make sure that spiritually the things that we're doing is aligned with what? Our daily performance, which is, alhamdulillah, something we do. The whole program is looked at as well, alhamdulillah, again, through the lens of a Muslim, somebody who practices the deen, because we can't ignore the Islamic aspect, the Islamic paradigm in achieving peak performance.
SubhanAllah. And one of the kind of definitions that the ulama of tafsir give to barakah is getting more for what you give, right? So that's
leverage.
Leverage, exactly. That's literally the translation of it, because there's even a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when there was one vessel of milk, 72 Sahaba drank from it. And he told Abu Bakr when he came to drinking, he says, drink to your fill. And when he drank to his fill, one vessel, 72 Sahaba, he gave it to Abu Bakr, he drank to his fill until his stomach was full, and then he gave it to the Prophet ﷺ. So it's showing you, it doesn't necessarily mean that all I have is this resource at the moment. It's about how can I use, obviously there's not really self-reflection here, but I mean the concept of you can have a little bit, but you can get a lot more for it if you use this system. Honestly, this is the system that's going to get you to 7, 8, and 9 figures.
And you know what's funny? Athletes use feedback loops, right? All athletes, all professional athletes, they use feedback loops.
But what if an athlete is looking at this, he's saying, I don't use that?
No, they do. Like, unless, bro, you're not a professional athlete if you don't. I'm talking about professional athletes, right? Yeah. All professional athletes use it. They use metrics like their sleep to understand their performance tomorrow, etc. They use aspects like what? Their blood pressure, etc. That's why, literally, if you've seen today, this is the reason, by the way, a lot of those footballers now, what are we seeing with them? They have all of these, stat sports bands that they're wearing. They make them wear these things while they're playing football. A lot of them, you can see bands like myself, because all of these things help you engage in what? Feedback loops. When you're able to actually correctly understand the data you're getting from these things and correct your life based on it, that's powerful. And I want you guys to understand, I even heard of Ustad Imran, like other people saying as well, how the Whoop bands have been so beneficial for them. Why do you think that is? Let's break it down. Feedback loops. It gives you live data on yourself, how things are going, etc. And you are able to correct that thing. Okay, my sleep performance was very bad, or I involved in high strain, I worked out a lot today. It's telling you need to get to bed early. You're able to get feedback, live feedback, real-time data to understand what changes you need to make now throughout your day. It's the same same thing. If you're able to engage in that with your personal life, with your performance, with your stress, etc., and you're able to allow that, leverage that information to benefit you, it's a game changer. Absolute game changer. And that's why entrepreneurs more than anyone. Look, I'll tell you guys, by the way, perhaps I haven't revealed on the podcast why I love entrepreneurs so much and why I've chosen to spend my life working with them, right? Because after days, entrepreneurs are the most important people, in my opinion, in the world. They provide services to the ummah. They benefit the people. They do. They provide services and benefit to the ummah. Da'is, they call to Islam. We benefit the Muslims, alhamdulillah, through what? Through the services we provide. No. We solve issues. We make things that aren't available for the Muslims, we make them there. What's a perfect example of this? When you look at it, many of our clients, again, they work directly with entrepreneurs. And that's why I'm so passionate about getting them to peak performance, right? And why we're so passionate about helping them get to peak performance. Because I understand that the better this guy can perform, the more people he can serve. The more your bucket is full, the more you have to give out, bro. So that's why I'm so passionate about working with these entrepreneurs, because it's like, if we can help you more and more, naturally what starts to happen? You get better and better and better in your business as well. Does that make sense? Your business skills, you can help more people, and that's what we care about and why we're passionate about this. So entrepreneurs need this more than anyone. The feedback loops.
But see, the thing is about reflection and filling in time trackers and documenting and journaling. That takes up a lot of time. Like, I'm an entrepreneur, you know what I'm saying? Like, people pay me 5,000 euro maybe, or 10,000 euro for 1 or 2 consultations of my time. Why would I put my time into this?
Yeah, tracking data for a company takes ages. So it actually does. To track the data, make sure it's all correct. It takes a long time, right? But why do we always track the data when it comes to our companies? Because we understand that that's what allows us to make correct decisions, right? Look, there's a beautiful quote I love, right? But I've switched it a little bit, inshallah, for the Muslims. In Allah we trust, all others must bring data. Don't tell me, Fawaz, I have this opportunity, bring me the data. Don't tell me, Fawaz, I have this, bring me the data. In Allah we trust, I only trust Allah. If you want to talk to me about something, bring me data. Now, why do we do that? Because we are able to make far more informed decisions based on the data we have. You would be able to make far more informed decisions on yourself based on what? The data you had. Self-reflection isn't something that, it's high leverage. It's an investment for your company. It's an investment for yourself, your relationships. It betters every aspect of your life. I've never met anything more higher leverage than self-reflections with the combination of feedback loops. Right? Because that is the base as well of performance. That's what makes performance so good and what we teach, because again, you're using lifetime feedback. This isn't a rookie program, by the way. I have to break it down. You know what? I actually have to give credit to the team, alhamdulillah, and Allah, of course, Yani, for allowing us to build what we've built. This isn't something light. This is something crazy, bro. This is actually things that are important metrics that we've adopted. We've decided that this is what entrepreneurs need to track from our data of entrepreneurs. We've been able to combine all these things to what? Give a system that genuinely works, that gets them to where they need to be.
Okay, so a part of the thing that you've mentioned before, and again, now as we're getting more complex and more advanced in these podcasts, again, if you can't catch up with the podcast, just go get the Peak Performance Program. But as a structure, right, you always talk about, okay, we have to stop escaping, okay, low leverage tasks and just doing things to fill in the time. And you talk about having just spare time to think, and the word you actually used was to reflect. Is that mostly the time when you reflect, or when is the most time where you get most mental clarity?
Perfect. I reflect around 3 times per day. Around 3 times per day, right? I do normally have set times, and they're more different. The intensity of them is different, okay? And I'm gonna, honestly, what we're about to say is a gem. Like, what I'm about to give you is a gem, so I beg you, well, like, from the start of this podcast, just open up your ears. You're about to hear something crazy, right? I'm about to mention next, right? When it comes to feedback loops, yeah? I want you to understand this and what time is good to reflect. There's 3 times I believe human beings should engage in reflection. And I'll tell you exactly why I engage in reflection at those 3 times in a day. Number 1 is first thing in the morning, right? This isn't so much reflection, but it's just remembering last night's reflection. So I'm actually going to start from what? The night time. Why does it make sense to start from nighttime? When Allah talks about night and day in the Quran, what does Allah always start with? Night. Because your night ultimately affects your performance the next day. That's just a fact. That's how it has to be, right? Right? Again, Allah mentions nighttime first and then day, right? So ultimately, why do I reflect at night before I go to sleep? There's a couple of questions I'm asking myself. Again, what did I do today that was meaningful, beneficial? What's a high leverage task I involved in today? what do I need to do again? And this is the best question, the final question I always ask myself. There's more, but I'm not going to leave them here. Perhaps we'll have some sort of link below for people to get those questions that I ask myself every night. The last question I ask myself is, what can I do to make tomorrow better? What does this question do? It actually like shapes the day I have tomorrow. It helps me shape what I want my tomorrow to look like. Does that make sense? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, guys. I just want to apologize. Sorry, the second half of this podcast was actually deleted, lil asaf. But I want to take a chance to say, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, from Allah's fadl, we had an amazing year, and we have a lot more coming for you guys in this upcoming year, bi'idhnillahi al-kareem. We are also taking 4 people for our Live by Design program, our Live by Design framework, in which we created to coach CEOs to allow them to scale their businesses without sacrificing their deen or their khushu in salah or all the other things that they desired to do prior to starting business. In fact, those reasons that they started business in the first place. So we're going to help them scale their revenue, deal with a lot less stress and burnout, and have way more focus in ibadah and establish a far closer relationship to Allah. If you would like to make sure that you reach your business and personal goals this upcoming year, then make sure to click the link in the description and book a call with myself.